Today's show is brought to you by a great partner of ours named Connect Travel. Connect Travel puts on the premier trade shows and conventions in the destination marketing industry. Coming up in February is the Marketing Leadership Summit, and that's February 19th through the 21st in Kissimmee, Florida. We're really excited about that event. It has a unique format that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. So go to connecttravel.com if you want more information. We hope to see you there.
We tend to think about more is better, and we've been conditioned to attracting more visitors, and all of the metrics by which we're generally judged are quantitative. And I think there's a real lack of understanding or appreciation for the qualitative side of the destination. And I think today, we would all agree that the customer experience or the visitor experience is important, but we don't know how to measure it. And that's really what we are trying to address here.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker. I'm president and CEO of an advertising agency called Relic that focuses specifically on destination marketing. And after what we've learned, we decided to start a podcast and really talk about destination marketing on a weekly basis and give you tips and tricks that you can implement tomorrow or even today if you listen to it in the morning. We've got a great show for you today, and it's a little bit of a different guest than what we've been bringing to you in the past, but something that I think is going to be a huge benefit to all of our listeners. We also have an exclusive unveiling that's going to be happening today, so excited to bring that to you. We've got a great guest, and his name is Chris Fair, and he is president and CEO of Resonance. And Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, and we'll get to kind of this exclusive content in just a moment, but we have a few questions that we ask everybody just as kind of an icebreaker when we bring them on the show. It's a destination marketing podcast, so we like to ask first and foremost, what is your dream destination? If you could go anywhere in the world, Chris, where would it be?
Well, that's like asking you which one of your children is your favorite. That's a difficult one to answer. But, one of my favorite destinations has always been Charleston, South Carolina. I think it's got a really unique sense of place, and it's a place that I haven't been to in a long time, so I'd love to go back.
I'm glad you brought that up because we haven't had anybody bring up Charleston, South Carolina on their dream destination, but my wife and I this year actually went out to Charleston and just had an incredible time. We spent an entire week out there and just really, really enjoyed ourselves. The dining is great. The activities are great. We did a horse and buggy tour. Lots of fun.
Yeah, it's got a real distinct sense of place to it, which is what we always look for in a destination.
Absolutely. Okay, so you would say then that that's also maybe your favorite place that you've ever visited?
Yeah, I think it's certainly up there, along with places like Barcelona is probably a city that I love, and I've spent a lot of time, and having done some work with the city there over the couple of years, developed a deeper understanding and appreciation for it. So, that's probably one of my favorite destinations, just because I learned something new, both from a professional perspective, and also enjoy different experiences every time I visit.
Great. Tell me, maybe in Charleston and Barcelona, maybe your favorite activity that you've done in both of those places.
Charleston, I think it's got to be the food, the Southern cuisine, which is quite not the healthiest, but when you're on vacation, it's nice to indulge.
Did you do the fried green tomatoes when you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. Collard greens, succotash, shrimp and grits, all that good stuff.
Yep.
And I think favorite activity in a place like Barcelona, really for me is just discovering and walking through neighborhoods. Looking and understanding how the street life varies from one quarter to the next, and trying to actually avoid some of the main touristic areas and visiting more local cafes and restaurants.
Yeah, I haven't yet visited Barcelona, but I tell you what, with all the things that I hear about it, along with the rest of Spain and Europe, it sounds like a pretty amazing place.
Yeah, and it's got some challenges as a destination, which is what we've been working on with them to help them understand. We're all familiar with the term over-tourism now, and Barcelona certainly has been at the forefront of thinking about and dealing with how do you manage having too many tourists, too many visitors. And I think that's certainly from a destination marketing perspective, that's one of the emerging issues of our time that 10, 15 years ago, we weren't even thinking about.
Yeah, I think I'd like to get into the idea of over tourism here in just a little bit. A lot of destinations truly have over tourism, and then you've got another category of destinations that have more of a disbursement problem than an over tourism problem. They don't do a good job of diverting people from that one road that everybody likes to travel, and so it'll be interesting to dive into over tourism and the different maybe truths and myths that go along with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've alluded to it. You consult and work with several destinations across the world. And I'd love to have you kind of tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into tourism.
Sure. Well, my background is actually started in journalism. Went to journalism school in Montreal, and in my last year, had an opportunity to start a new newspaper geared at tourists at a resort called Mont Tremblant, a bilingual publication that was focused on educating visitors, both English and French, to all the activities and experiences that were to do at the resort. And that was really my introduction to tourism, and kind of a transition from journalism into tourism and eventually into branding and marketing as that resort grew and developed, and then doing branding and marketing for mountain resorts around North America and Europe. And eventually that led me to start Resonance in 2008, at which point I'd finished my master's degree in studies of the future at the University of Houston, and was really focused on creating a company that would help organizations think about the future of places of all kinds, not just hotels, resorts, but neighborhoods, communities. And today our company Resonance is working in more than 20 different destinations, ranging from urban neighborhoods to entire cities, to counties, and even some countries.
Great. Our producer Kyle here is getting excited because he's been to the resort that you kind of started at. So you guys can go back and forth and talk about that resort maybe after the show.
Sounds good.
Well, okay. So you guys, Resonance, now focused on helping organizations, communities, counties, and destinations to improve. Tell me a little bit about the process that you walk them through and what you guys really try to help with.
Yeah, there's really two sides to being a successful destination. One of them is from a demand perspective of raising awareness, stimulating interest amongst particular target audiences, and motivating them to visit your destination. And everybody that's in destination marketing understands what that's all about. And we do work with destinations on the branding and marketing and strategic positioning of their destination. The other side, and that's kind of, I think about it a little bit like an iceberg, and you kind of see the tip of the iceberg and outside of the water, and that's the brand of the destination. But there's this piece, actually the most substantive piece of the destination, that's below the surface, which is really looking at the destination as a product. And that's where we're also working with destinations to help them understand what are their key strengths and weaknesses from an infrastructure perspective, from an experiential perspective, programming, transportation, et cetera, and then working with them to develop destination development strategies or destination management strategies that are really long-term plans at looking at how they develop and manage that supply side aspect of the destination, which is really critical and or maybe more important than the brand and the marketing that's created, because as we know, consumers are increasingly influencing destination selection through online reviews and sharing of their experiences, whether that's through TripAdvisor, Yelp, Facebook, et cetera. So, the experiential quality of the destination and what it offers is more important than ever before.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're focused on the customer experience, because, we can do all the marketing and advertising and branding that we want, but nothing's going to get people to talk about it and be passionate about it the way that an incredible customer experience will. Tell me some of the things that you look at as you're going through that examination with a destination.
Yeah, I think that most destinations have a long inventory of their attractions, hotels, et cetera. What we really try and do is examine and determine what's important to the consumers that you're targeting. We really first developed our approach. We were working with the Fórte Ireland, the National Tourism Development Authority for the Republic of Ireland, on a strategy to attract more international visitors to the south and east of the country. And we first said, well, what are the assets? And they've had done exhaustive research, and they had a map with more than 1,000 points of interest in terms of hotels, landmarks, parks, trails. And our first question was, well, how do we determine what's important to international visitors? And this was back in 2014, and we developed the idea of mining user-generated reviews and TripAdvisor to see which of these attractions, hotels were actually being rated and reviewed positively by international visitors and to what intensity. And that really helped us filter to understand how, as I like to describe, how the visitors were consuming the place currently, so that we could then look at, based on what visitors are rating and recommending positively, how might we position and create a story for that region that would then attract more of those types of people. So as we work with destinations, we've really evolved that process over time. It's led to the creation of our world's best cities and America's best cities rankings. But we're filtering and slicing that data and really looking at that user-generated data as a new source of strategic intelligence that destinations can be using to understand how visitors are consuming their place and what some of their strengths and weaknesses are.
Great. And you worked with Ireland. Tell me about a couple of the other major projects that you guys have worked on.
Sure. We've done and become quite known for what are called tourism master plans, which are really long-term strategic plans for destinations. One of the first ones we completed 6 years ago was for the city of Vancouver. We've recently updated that and done some scenario planning and forecasting for Vancouver to look at what the tourism economy might look like in the year 2030, a variety of scenarios for them to help think about what they should be focusing on in the next 10 years. But since that time, we've worked with other cities like Portland in Oregon. We've just completed a tourism master plan for Richmond, Virginia. We've also done a destination management strategy for San Luis Obispo County, so a broader look at multiple municipalities within that destination. And right now, we're just in the process of finalizing one of our largest projects to date, which is a tourism master plan for the city of Los Angeles. As you know, city of Los Angeles is going to be hosting the Olympic Games in 2028. They hit a record number of visitors last year with more than 50 million, and we expect that by 2028 that'll rise as high as 68 million. So our focus there is really looking at what are the needs in terms of accommodation, transportation, infrastructure that Los Angeles needs to develop leading up to the Olympics. But then also, what are some of the issues that we might need to mitigate for the local community to make sure that growth and the benefits of tourism doesn't come at a cost to quality of life for the people that live in the city.
What an exciting project to be working on to help a city get ready to host the Olympics and look at all the infrastructure. I mean, LA has so much infrastructure for you to just examine that and identify the needs and challenges that come along with it. I mean, that's got to be a pretty intense project for you to be working on, right?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the most comprehensive, and there's a lot of variables as you think about, hotel accommodation. Tokyo is getting ready to host the Summer Olympics, and they're finding that they've got a vast shortage of hotel rooms. So, trying to hit that right where you don't overbuild and, end up in a white elephant scenario like cities like Athens did after they hosted the Olympics, with facilities and hotels that are underutilized. Or versus Tokyo that doesn't have enough accommodation or didn't prepare enough for the number of visitors that it's expecting to host and is now scrambling to come up with solutions. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a Goldilocks scenario of not trying to not too cold, not too hot, of just trying to figure out how to get it just right.
Right. I mean, I look at a city like Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and I think their brand took an incredible hit after kind of the experiences that many of the Olympians and travelers had when they went to Rio. I guess one of the most important things is for you to get in there and make sure, like you said, that they've got they don't overbuild, but that they've got the infrastructure that's going to support all the people that are going to be flocking to the area. But then after people leave, is it sustainable after the fact, right? Are we building major structures to host the Olympics, but then they're just going to sit there untouched for years and years and years? Yeah, it's a lot to consider, right?
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about we're gonna unveil this world's best cities that you guys really spend a lot of time working on and coming up with, and you've come up with your list for 2019, and I would love to have you kind of walk us through what that list is, and then we'll get into methodology and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, the world's best cities rankings, really is kind of a compendium of all of the work that we do over the course of the year. We're collecting data now for every city around the world with a metropolitan population of 1 million or more that has at least 50,000 reviews in TripAdvisor. So, there are a little over 200 cities that meet that criteria. And our goal in creating the world's best cities rankings, was really trying to help give people a new method of understanding place. There are many, many rankings out there. And what differentiates ours is some of the things are similar, that we're using core statistics like crime rate, or we're looking at the connectivity of the airport or size of the convention center. But really differentiates our rankings is the incorporation of that user-generated data for experiential factors. So going in and looking at TripAdvisor to see how many very good and excellent restaurants are there, or nightlife experiences, or parks, or sites and landmarks. Because we know that the experiential quality of place is increasingly determining where not only visitors choose to go, but also talent and capital investment from businesses. So our goal here is trying to create a holistic picture, not just tourism specific, but a amalgamation of factors that we've researched to find are important to visitors in choosing a city to visit, but also talent in choosing a city to work, and businesses in terms of choosing a city to invest. So really giving a 360-degree view of the city from and incorporating factors related to all three of those perspectives.
Great, and I love that you guys released this, because to me, this list of the world's best cities gives destinations kind of a beacon or a benchmark to shoot for, and look at these cities and why they made it, and say, okay, what do I need to improve as a destination? It's a great standard, I think, to have for destinations across the world.
Yeah, and I think our goal as we look at the rankings, we tell cities, that the overall rankings. I consider them, more entertainment than anything else. But the real insights come when we go into all the data behind those rankings and perform a custom analysis for a city or a destination, where we're not comparing them to every city in the world, but we're comparing them to their competitive set, whether that's geographically or economically or experientially, to help them understand, what are their comparative strengths and weaknesses on a much more focused basis, and drilling down into some of the individual factors. That's where the real insights come for destinations, to help them think about positioning themselves and branding themselves around their comparative strengths, and then addressing some of their weaknesses based on what might be important to the audiences they're seeking to attract.
Awesome. How long have you been doing this list?
So we started the first in 2015. So, this is our 5th year of producing, and the methodology has been refined a little bit over time, but it's been fairly consistent. And it's interesting to see how some of the cities are relatively static, and others that, we're seeing have been moving up the rankings steadily.
I mentioned earlier that today's show is brought to you by Connect Travel. Their Marketing Leadership Summit is coming up in February. I had the opportunity to go last year, and it was such an interesting format. It's actually a format that allows you as a destination to sit down with suppliers for a few minutes, a short period of time, to see if you want to continue the conversation. It allowed me to really meet with several people and get to know their needs quickly and build a quick relationship so that we could see if we wanted to continue the conversation. If you're looking for new technologies, new products, new partners, it's a great way to have a quick introduction without taking too much of your time. I hope to see you there February 19th through the 21st in Kissimmee, Florida, and President Obama will be speaking this year. So we're excited for that event, and we'll see you there. With this list, you guys get a lot of coverage, right? I mean, you've gotten picked up in media outlets all over the world, kind of referring to this list that you've come out with.
Yeah, it's amazing. Media certainly likes lists, and I think that's for consumers. It's easy; they're easy to consume, so they are quite popular. But yeah, I think in our last year's rankings, more than 800 different outlets around the world picked up and wrote stories, both digitally, broadcast, and in print around the world.
Great. Great. Well, let's talk about the list. First of all, you mentioned your methodology. I know you have 6 core categories that you look at as you're evaluating the cities that qualify. Tell me a little bit about those 6 categories and what you do to evaluate each one.
Sure. We started out first off partnering with Ipsos and conducting a survey across the U.S. Of the general population to identify what they told us were the most important factors in choosing a city to visit or in choosing a city to live. Then we also complemented that with a survey of business decision makers and asking them what factors they considered most important in choosing a city to do business. So all of the factors came out of that list, out of that survey, and we did identify 6 groupings, as you said, of factors. The first is around place. So we're looking at the quality of the natural environment. We're looking at weather. We're looking at crime rates. But then we're also looking at the number of very good or excellent sites and landmarks and neighborhoods that's coming out of TripAdvisor. And we're also looking at the number of very good or excellent parks and outdoors experiences. So those factors form the place category. The second category we look at is product. So as you think about cities and their investment in institutions and infrastructure, so things like universities, airports, convention centers, these are things that are expensive, big investments, but they do move the needle in terms of attracting tourists, talent, and investment to the cities. And I often call that category the hardware of the city. Which then takes us into the programming, which is our third category, which is really the software of the city, which are all of the experiences, things like culture, nightlife, restaurants, shopping. These we mine. All of the data comes out of TripAdvisor, where we're looking at each of those experiential categories and looking at how many very good or excellent experiences each city offers based on the ratings and reviews of past visitors and residents to the city. And then the fourth category we look at is people. This really reflects more what business decision makers tell us is important in choosing a city, of looking at educational attainment of the local population, but also the diversity, which I think is becoming increasingly important to visitors as well, that we're interested in culturally diverse cities and destinations. Our fifth category is prosperity, where we look at key economic indicators such as household income to measure the relative prosperity of one city to another. And we also look at the number of global 500 corporate headquarters each city offers. And the last category, which is very destination related, but also shows a high correlation with attracting investment and businesses to a city, is the promotion category. And this is where we're looking at Instagram. How many mentions are there for a city? We're looking at how Facebook check-ins in terms of all of the establishments with the city, how many people have checked in to those establishments on Facebook. We're looking at a city's Google Trend Score in terms of our searches rising or falling for that particular city. And then we're also looking at Google searches, total. So all of these factors really speak to the relative buzz there is around one city to the next. And there's some of the factors that we've seen that have the highest correlation with attracting visitors, talent, and investment to a city. So the overall rankings then are each of these factors within these 6 categories. A city gets an overall score in each of those categories, and the overall score is determined by the average of those 6 category rankings to bring us to the overall rankings that we publish.
And the list that you publish is the top 25, right? The top 25 scores.
We actually publish the top 100 so we're looking at more than 200 cities, collecting all the data, and then publishing the results for those cities that make the top 100 overall.
Great. So let's say I'm a destination. I'm probably not going to make your top 100 cities list, right? And there's destinations that, like, for example, if we don't hit the TripAdvisor review metric that you've got set aside, then we don't necessarily qualify, right? So let's say I'm a destination and I don't qualify. These 6 categories that you're using to evaluate destinations could still be critical components for any destination to say, okay, where do I stand? Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do, a lot of custom research and analysis, not only for cities but even neighborhoods. For example, we've worked with New York City's Department of Economic Development and looking at Brooklyn versus Harlem versus Jamaica versus Astoria versus Jersey City, of even actually using this methodology on a very focused basis within a city to understand what are some of the characteristics and differentiators of one neighborhood versus another. So, of course, we can do that within counties. We can do that within groups of small cities. And I think that's where, the real insights come from, of being able to compare yourself to like-sized cities. When, again, whether those are regional competitors, they might be experiential competitors. For example, we've done this with mountain resorts, looking at what differentiates Vail versus Whistler versus Aspen versus Jackson Hole versus Big Sky, or Caribbean countries and islands. And so there's a variety of ways that we can apply this methodology to create, real insights for destinations to help them understand their comparative strengths and weaknesses from a supply side perspective.
Perfect. Perfect. And let's say I'm a destination and I read your report and I say, I feel like our city was missed. I feel like we should have been a part of that. Is there a way to reach out to you guys and kind of make your case for next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've certainly have cities that look at, why didn't we make the rankings? And sometimes it's because of size. We do in our America's Best Cities rankings, we do look at small cities. Those are populations of 200,000 to a million. But we do have data now for more than 400 cities around the world. So there is an opportunity that, and some smaller cities do come and reach out to us, or destinations, and we ask us, and we actually have data for many more cities than are published within these rankings that we can do some custom work for, to help them understand, why they're not making the rankings, and what some of the areas that they should be focusing on.
What do you feel like you learn about the industry as a whole as you go through this process? I mean, you research tons of destinations, you gather a ton of data. What are you seeing industry wide?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think, first of all, as an industry in the destination marketing space, that we tend to think about more is better, and we've been conditioned to attracting more visitors, and all of the metrics by which we're generally judged are quantitative. And I think there's a real lack of understanding or appreciation for the qualitative side of the destination. And I think to date, we would all agree that the customer experience or the visitor experience is important, but we don't know how to measure it. And that's really what we are trying to address here, and fill that void of creating new tools, utilizing new data sources like TripAdvisor or Yelp, to help destinations understand their destination from a supply side perspective. So I think that's number one. I think number two, we're starting to sort of look at and see, well, what are some of the most important factors, or which factors have the highest relationship to attracting visitors. And I think we anecdotally all know that, social media is important to destinations, and as a marketing channel, and certainly our research backs that up when we've done some further analysis and looked at all of our rankings and the correlation between how a city performs on Instagram or Facebook or TripAdvisor has almost a linear relationship in terms of visitation to that destination. So I think we've really rationalized or justified the importance of social media as a marketing channel in terms of attracting visitors today. And I don't think that will come as a surprise to anyone, but seeing that empirically demonstrated through data is interesting. And then from a product perspective, I think, we've also learned and seen, the importance of airport connectivity, that's really rising in importance. And again, I think we all appreciate and understand as destinations the importance of air route development. One of the interesting factors that we've seen that has a high relationship is also public transportation. And I think that's something that we haven't thought a lot about as destinations, but that more and more visitors, we talk about millennials not wanting to own cars as much in places they live, but that's also true of places they visit. So there's a growing interest and desire for being able to consume and travel around a destination using other modes of transportation other than private cars. So I think that's also one of the things that's really on our radar as we think about plans for destinations in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think transportation for visitors is going to become more and more critical, especially as you look at a place like LA, where there's already so many traffic issues. the ability to get around with kind of a group transport system as opposed to everybody renting a car and driving and congesting the highways. I think, and that's one example, but I think that's a critical piece. I'm glad you guys are going to start incorporating that more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we continue as we do this year after year, or gaining new insights around what's important to the visitor of the future, and we'll probably be incorporating other data points over time as we learn more through this process.
Great. Well, let's talk about some of your favorites that made the list. There's 100 cities. We're not going to go through all of them, but maybe highlight a few of them and why you felt like they really hit all those categories for you.
Sure. Well, the top three are pretty much what you would expect in terms of London comes out as the number one in our city rankings. New York is number two. Paris is number three. And Tokyo is number four. And I don't think those would surprise anyone. I mean, those are really sort of the mega cities that dominate all types of rankings. I think one of the ones that's a surprise for me is looking at Moscow at number five. And Moscow's not a city I've been to. And I think from a Western perspective, it's not really on our radar, but actually, Moscow has the best airport connectivity of any city in the world. You can fly direct to Moscow to more cities than any of the other cities in our rankings. So those are kind of interesting things that I think that you start to learn about cities that stimulate some interest. One of my favorite cities, as I mentioned earlier, is Barcelona, and it performs quite well in our rankings. Coming in at number 8 this year, which is pretty impressive when you consider Barcelona is a much smaller than some of these larger cities, like the Los Angeleses of the world or Rome's. And I think that really speaks to the experiential quality of the city, and the data proves that out. And also the promotion of the city in terms of the buzz that visitors create, for Barcelona. As you work your way down the rankings, there's other cities that are interesting that pop up, and they might not perform in the top 25, but places like Copenhagen, that is a city that I really appreciated and enjoyed. That doesn't perform as high in our rankings, but again, starts to become very small differences as you move down the list. While one city might be in 75th place and another city's in 25th place, there might be very small differences in their scores. There's just so much competition, and I think that does speak to really the role of destinations and cities. Is looking at all of these places are getting more and more sophisticated in their marketing, in their strategy, and the competition is only growing. So while the visitor economy and travel and tourism continues to grow, so is the competition. And I think that's what, that really speaks to the importance of measuring and monitoring and benchmarking your destination to understand that performance and how it's changing from one year to the next, which, we do see some destinations like Abu Dhabi, for example, moved into the top 20 this year. It moved up 20 spots. So there are some that are moving significantly. And Dubai moved up in our rankings as well. So they're not as static as we might have expected, that we do see a lot of fluidity from one year to the next as cities introduce new infrastructure, new experiences, their promotion on Instagram or Facebook. Some are doing a better job, so that affects their results and their position, and there can be some big swings from one year to the next.
Yeah, to me, that kind of speaks to how fast the industry is moving, right? I mean, it's an arms race. Everybody is trying to get better and better and better. And you see Abu Dhabi jumping 20 spots and it's so fluid. Man, that speaks to, if you're not on your game today, guess what? 3 other destinations may pass you tomorrow, because everybody is trying to get better and better. So we just, as destination marketers, I think we have got to be on our game at all times because of how fast the industry is moving.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we like to say that, visitors come from everywhere, but they don't choose to go everywhere. They're not evenly distributed. So they're choosing particular places. And I think that's really the heart of, what we're trying to get at is understanding what are those points of influence that shape perception of and desire to visit a destination, and being able to actually monitor and measure that, so that we can see which cities are performing, and then we can study those cities to understand, what is Barcelona doing that we could apply in, let's say, Los Angeles. They're not directly competitors, but there are best practices that can be exported from one city to another.
Okay. And what about, so you've got the world's best cities report, you've got America's best cities. Do you have plans to expand into other reports, for example, small cities and towns, or other types of destinations that might not necessarily be able to qualify for either America's best or world's best?
Yes, we are looking for this year to do smaller cities. So looking at cities in the U.S. from 100,000 to 200,000 population. So, starting to collect data for more and more cities. We've actually done an analysis of cities in China. We haven't published a report, but have been experimenting with using Chinese user-generated sources, of which there's a plethora to collect data from.
Yeah.
So, I think there is opportunities here to take this methodology and apply it in different regions. And, that's actually where you get more insights. The closer, then tighter you focus the research in on, the more insights that you can observe and generate.
Great. Chris, this has been great. And I'd really like to be able to post the list in our Destination Marketers LinkedIn group that many of our listeners are a part of. Would you be willing to go on and post the list there so that people can kind of see where they stand, or if they made the list, or kind of what the new benchmark is for them to look forward to?
Yes, we'd certainly be happy to share that. And of course, all of the data is available at bestcities.org. And if your city isn't there, but you're interested in some of the data that we collect, we'd be happy to chat and look at how we might be able to produce some custom reports and insights for your particular destination.
Great. That's bestcities.org.
That's right.
Perfect. Well, as you know, our listener base is destination marketers across the country. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you feel like would be beneficial for our listeners to hear, or advice that you might have?
Yeah, I think the one key takeaway, or our mantra and message, is to not just measuring and benchmarking yourselves as a DMO on a quantitative basis, but start thinking about your destination and benchmarking it from a qualitative perspective as well. And historically, that was always done with visitor intercept surveys, and you could ask visitors while they're in your destination what they like or what they're not happy with or satisfied with. But we feel that this approach is a whole new level of understanding when you can compare yourself to dozens or hundreds of other destinations to better understand what's going on within your particular place and what you should be focusing on and prioritizing. So whether it's using our methodology or other sources out there, I think that focus on the supply side and putting as much research and effort into benchmarking and monitoring the quality of the destination and not just the quantity of room nights and ADR and occupancy is something that successful DMOs and destination marketers are all going to be focused on in the future.
Great. So destination marketers, as you listen to this, I think a great question to ask yourself is, am I looking at the qualitative data as well as the quantitative to help me make sure that my destination is offering a superior customer experience? Well, Chris, this has been great, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be the exclusive podcast released for the World's Best Cities report. We're excited to get it posted, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your thoughts and ideas with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having us, and I look forward to continuing the conversation about cities and destinations in the future.
Great. Well, everybody, this has been another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.